Hello everyone, Marcos here from Piktochart, and I want to welcome you to a very special workshop on education. This is led by the one and only Rachelle Poth, and is part of our Back to School 2022 initiative. This initiative is dedicated to one of our favorite users, teachers and educators. So if you're a teacher or an educator, you're in the right place, and if you're not, stick around. There are a lot of things you can learn throughout the workshop. Also remember that Piktochart is the #1 solution to create impactful graphics and visuals and make your classes more fun, clear and engaging. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the schedule today. First, we're going to have the workshop with Rachelle, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some resources that we prepare for you. We have videos and tutorials that are going to help you apply all the things that you're going to learn from Rachelle. After that, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our special back to school giveaway where you can win a lot of prizes. And even though this video is pre-recorded, don't forget that Rachelle is going to join us live right here on this side on the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the workshop, just pop them out there and she'll do her best to answer to your questions. Now, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit more about who Rachelle Poth is. Rachelle Dené Poth is an edtech consultant, presenter, attorney, author, and teacher. She was named one of the 30 K-12 IT influencers for 2021 and one of the 150 women thought leaders to follow for 2022. Rachelle teaches Spanish and a program called STEAM What's Next in Emerging Technology at Riverview Junior-Senior High School in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. Since 2019, Rachelle has written 7 books for educators, and she's also a columnist for Getting Smart and a blogger for Define Learning and Neo LMS. She has a podcast named Thriving Edu and is the host of a PBL podcast by Define Learning on BAM Radio Network. She has a thriving edu community and does a live show each week with guests speaking about education. My favorite part is she's a Piktochart user since 2015, and she's been using Piktochart to diversify and accelerate her students' learning of a new language. So Rachelle, well, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to be here with you today to present this session about Piktochart and some ideas for back to school in 2022. I'll share with you some creative ways that I've used the infographics in my classroom, having students create, and of course, myself. My name is Rachelle Dené Poth, and I am a Spanish and a STEAM educator and also a consultant. And I just love learning. I love sharing ideas. So thank you to everybody who's joining in here today. I hope that you walk away with some new ideas. I also hope that you will share the ways that you use infographics in your classroom or in your role. Drop some questions into the chat, answer some questions as well. And don't hesitate to reach out to me to share your ideas, to share some of the things that you've been creating, or maybe that you create while you're joining in here today, because certainly no better time than to open up a tab and to start creating as you're learning. But I would love to learn from you and share some new ideas with my students. And I'm looking forward to sharing 5 ideas for back to school, and of course, that you can use throughout the year. So thank you again for joining in, and let's go ahead and get started. So the big question is, when it comes to information and creating things in our classroom, especially with infographics, you might wonder, well, why? Why should we use infographics? What are the benefits of using infographics? And whether or not you've ever used them, there are a lot of benefits to them. And I can tell you in my personal experience, it goes back probably 8 years when I first started to use Piktochart for a graduate course that I was taking. And it was my first experience using anything like it. And we needed to do some research on a topic and present all the information. And there were some requirements that we had received from our instructor. And those requirements included like a limit to word count. We had to have some visuals. They wanted some different charts or graphs. They wanted some hyperlinks, potentially some videos, and all of that condensed into, not a very big presentation. So the challenge was there. I learned about Piktochart and I started to use it. And for that presentation that I had to do and create in those limits, it was really easy to design. And so from that point on, I started to use them more and more for a lot of different things over the years since then. So when we think about infographics and we break it down to the info, the information, and the graphics, because of all of the design elements we can put into it, we understand what the benefits are. And my guess is that you've probably either created a lot of them, maybe not so much using a digital tool like Piktochart, but maybe just design things in your classroom or just for your own personal use. If you're making notes of things you have to do, or if you're taking notes from something that you're reading, for example. But for our students, these are great ways to have them create and share with their learning. So there are a couple of objectives for infographics and why you might decide to use them. First one, of course, you have the information. So for my students, one example, project-based learning. When they are learning about whatever their topic is, they might come across a lot of information, and writing a very lengthy report that might be handwritten or typed, or making a long presentation, sometimes it's hard to condense that into a form that you can share with others. So if you have a lot of information, you can condense it and put it into something that is very visually engaging, which leads us to objective number 2. So you want it to kind of attract the attention of your audience and make them curious about what it is that's being presented in that infographic that you've created. And then the third one, complex data. So when students are doing things like project-based learning in my case, or if you're doing research and you're finding there's a lot of information and statistics and you have all of this, you can easily find a lot of ways to put that into an infographic and make it easier to understand. Because when it comes to numbers and statistics and percentages, you might see all of these varying charts and graphs, but being able to put them into one space where they're color-coded, or you have a choice in the types of structures that they are, if it's a pie chart, if it's a bar graph, for example, you can communicate that easier. People look at it and they get the idea of what it is that you are conveying. And then the other piece of it is the retention of content. And so when you're creating, I know for myself, I think about the information I want to put into that infographic. I want to make it very visually engaging. So there's lots of choices in the backgrounds and the elements that you can add and the colors and the fonts and so much. And I want to take a lot of information and be able to convey that to my audience in a faster way. And then, of course, to retain the content. So as an instructional tool, if we're teaching something that we know is a difficult concept for students, using an infographic to kind of chunk the information, to put it into a format where they can look at it, they can engage with it, and they can retain it more, makes a big difference. And so there are many reasons why you might decide to use infographics. And of course, I'm going to share a lot with you here that are great for back to school, but also great for any time. Now, when it comes to putting your infographic together, there are different sections that you want to consider. And I encourage you, multitasking is always a good thing, to create your account, to go in, to explore. And that's what I find works the best. When it comes to tools that we're using in our classroom, there's lots of templates that we can choose from. Learning from students is always a good thing. So we don't have to know all the things. We just need to know enough to get started. And let's say you want to teach students how to design an infographic. Simply find one of the already made templates, use that, and then maybe make a few changes to it and encourage your students to do the same thing. But when it comes to the sections, we focus on the things which are very visual. So what are the elements that you're going to put into your infographic? There's lots to choose from, which you'll see whenever you go into it and start designing, and you'll see in some of the examples. What's the content and the knowledge? Like, what are we trying to convey? What's the information? What are people going to take away from that infographic that we have created? And again, within the library, and you can search all types of templates and make some slight changes. And I remember a couple of years ago, I took one of the templates and I changed the title of it. I changed some of the background, the colors, and I printed all 3 of them. And the students that I showed it to, and also the educators at the conference where I presented on it, were amazed at how different it was from that original. And it's not like it took a ton of time, because I think what we need sometimes is just that starting point to get us to go and try something different and to dive in. And that's the same thing that we want to do for our students. So thinking about what is information that you want to convey? How do I want to convey that information? Is it better with some different charts, a certain color, some different elements and things that we add in, a different background, for example? So the message that we want to share, and I tell this to my students, and you may do this as well if you are a classroom teacher or for anybody, is thinking about when you're creating, what is it that you want the person who is looking at that, interacting with that, to walk away with? Is it important? Yes, because you're creating something. And then after they look at it, if it has different images, if it has links, if it has videos involved in part of the design, are they going to get the information that you want them to? Is the layout, is the design friendly and visually engaging enough that it's going to capture their attention and not be distracting, but give them enough that they will then retain that information, or in the case of students, retain the content that we are trying to teach them. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Like, what is the purpose? What is the why behind it? And then figure out what are the best tools within that will help you to convey that to your students or to teachers or to families or whoever you're creating the infographic for. So let's dive in to some of the ideas for the start of the new school year. And again, these are specific for back to school, but you can really use these at any time, and you can build upon these activities and ideas as well. But just to give you some, let's dive into the new school year ideas, you will find lots of examples here, some of which that I've created, some that are templates that are available within Piktochart, so you can find them easily, but all of them will be linked for you so you can find them and you can start designing right away. So I'll take you through some of the examples and ways that I've used them. There are a lot of benefits as well, especially as we want students to develop these technology skills, to be responsible digital citizens as they're creating and sharing information, but also to have new ways to share that information. And there are lots of options out there, speaking about something in class, using paper to hand students the materials. But whenever we can model the practice of, embracing new ideas and trying new technologies and taking some risks with creating and model that for students and then get them involved as well, we learn from each other. And a lot of the time, the students take the lead more and they enjoy it because they find something that is really personalized and meaningful to them. They can find lots of different backgrounds and use different fonts and design something that helps them to learn and retain that content even more. Plus, with some of these ideas at the start of the new school year, for example, getting to know your students, for them getting to know you, to understand what the class is about, what to expect, and even just checking in on them throughout the year. And then even using Piktochart and infographics here in this case for some lessons, for interactive lessons. If we happen to be virtual or you're doing some flipped learning, for example, lots of ways to use infographics for those. And if you stick around long enough, you'll even have a nice long list of about 25 ideas. And I know there are many more than that. So let's dive in with the first idea. So we're heading back to school and you might be preparing your classroom and thinking about all the things that you need to cover. Of course, we want to get to know our students, but they need to understand what to expect in our classroom. So what better way than to dive in and create something that is very visually engaging and inviting for students? Well, fortunately, with Piktochart, we have a lot of templates available, and these too you can find in the library if you search them. All I did was change the information. I changed some of the colors, some of the background, some of the elements that I added into it. The links that are in there would be active. So you could post this if you have a classroom website, if your school is using an LMS, and have it easily accessible for students and families that are supporting them to be able to access the materials. So let's just say that we are in fully virtual learning. Infographics are great because you can put all that information. You're welcoming students back to school. You have the overview of what's going to be covered. And if you have a meeting, if you have recordings, notes, assignments, anything, you can link that right within the infographic. And looking at it, it's a lot of fun to look at because it's very visually engaging. And students in this case would understand exactly what was expected of them. The welcome back to school. If you want to share this out in a school newsletter, on a school website, on your own website, inviting students back into the classroom, welcoming them, sharing your information, and being positive, like, hey, here we are starting a new school year. It's exciting. This, again, is a template that you can use and just change it to make it more personal for you. It's a good way to just kind of introduce yourself, especially if you're new to the school or the students are new to you. In my case, I teach Spanish and STEAM, and a lot of the students I've had in the prior year, so I know most of them, but it's still always good to introduce yourself to them and to have this available to families as well so they can get to know you throughout the year and, of course, starting at the beginning of the year. So here are some other examples that you can find. Now, you can have a class schedule, the course plan, you can go through the curriculum with the objectives for all different content areas, different grade levels, and these are already set. So if you decide, I really like the one that's in the middle, guess what? That's very similar to the one that I shared on the previous slide. So all you have to do is keep it as it is and substitute the links for your own, maybe change the information that's listed for the topics and assignments or the week. Maybe you don't really like the colors and you want to change them to something different or change it every single week. The best thing is that once you create it, you can duplicate it. So you can use that same structure, that same template that you've created or that you've taken from their massive library of options and just adjust it slightly each time and make it available to your students, to their families. If you're a tech coach, an administrator, these are things that you can use as well for your teachers. And I think it's a good model to set. So if you're looking to get more ideas into your school, creating something and sharing it, and then people become curious about that's really interesting, or that's very visually engaging. I wonder what they use. And so just by interacting with that, it sometimes, and I've seen it happen in my own experience, gives people just that little bit of a boost to try something that's a little bit different. So if you have a class syllabus that you've been using, and maybe it's typed on Microsoft Word, or you use something else for it that for the last couple of years has worked really well, you can still use that. Just transfer that into one of the templates. And now you have some different elements. You have some images. You can have a link to your email, a website. You can even have a video in there. Lots of possibilities. It just makes it more visually engaging. It's accessible if you post it on your class website. If you use an LMS, like I had mentioned, it's just a nice way to kind of start the year and let everybody know what's expected, what they can expect from you, and get to know you and build those relationships. So on to idea number 2, other things that you can make. Let's talk about meeting the teacher and the students. And we know that the beginning of the school year, throughout the school year, it is really important that we continue to work on building relationships, helping students to develop social emotional learning skills. But especially as we head back to school, we want our students to get to know us. We want to get to know our students and for them to know each other. And we also want their families to get to know us as well. And so with Piktochart, there are a lot of options available that you can use that don't take a ton of time. Now, for me, years ago, I first created the one that is on the left. And for anybody who's joining in, I would love to know if you have done something similar where you have created an infographic about yourself, things that you're interested in, your likes, how to connect with you. It's very visual in that if you look at it, you can probably tell, well, I put trees in it, which means I must like trees and nature and being outside. It doesn't have to have a lot of text. So students can just have fun looking at some of the different options for adding things in, to share a little bit about who they are, what their experiences are, what their interests may be for the upcoming school year. And the same thing for us as the teachers, creating something that shares with our students and also with their families, even the school community. Having this as something that is shared on our school website, for example, is a great way to really help us get to know one another. Now, the image that's on the right, I had a lot of fun using some of the templates and I couldn't decide which one to go with, but you may see something similar coming up here. I just took one that was already available and used the about me, the working experience, some fun facts that I added in there, and then kept my contact information. I added in some hyperlinks to a podcast and a community that I have on Facebook. And of course, the nice thing about Piktochart is if you are involved in social media and you want to put, your Twitter handle, for example, and you just say, gee, I wish they had like the Twitter symbol or Instagram. They do. All you have to do is search for it and add those right on to your infographic. And so something like this is a great way to share who we are and for students to create this about themselves as well. And what I love about it, again, is we don't have to start from scratch, and our students don't have to either. We could find one template that we would like for them to use, ask them to fill out the information, add some fun facts, share some key information about who they are, what their experiences are, what they're hoping for during the school year. If they have contact information, depending on who you work with, if you're working in higher education, for example, you might want your students to do this as a way to get to know each other, especially if you're learning in a virtual environment. And a couple of years ago, as many of us know, I should say, not all of us, but many of us had the experience of starting the school year virtually and wanting to get to know our students, for them to get to know each other. And so this is a really great way to be able to do that, because we can include so much information, links to websites, if that's the case. If we have a YouTube channel, for example, and we want students to look at videos we've created for our class, everything can be housed in that one space. And it's very visually engaging. So those are just a few of my examples. But here are some of the templates. So thinking about the start of the school year, or even throughout the year, just creating something to share with your students, to share with the families of the students. And again, you can choose any one of these. And don't forget that all of the links for the templates that you'll see in this presentation will be shared with you. So if you decide that you really like the one on the left and you just want to change maybe some of the colors in the background, or add a little bit extra information in terms of the contacts, or maybe a third fun fact, you can easily do that. And the same with students. The middle example has some symbols for things I love, things I dislike. This is a great way to get to know students, to get to know our colleagues. So in terms of your role, if you are an edtech coach, if you're an administrator, and you want your teachers to kind of, get into the technology usage a little bit more, this is something that you could have them create and share with one another. Students using this just to create something and building digital citizenship skills, but then also being able to look at what their classmates had created. It helps them to continue to develop those social emotional learning skills as well, becoming aware of their skills if they're talking about things they've learned, for example, or developing social awareness as they learn about others. Also, relationship building, of course, digital citizenship comes into that. And then even at the start of the year, talking about icebreakers, where students and teachers may not necessarily be fans of traditional icebreakers, but there are templates available for like a trivia quiz, or you could make something like a would you rather and have different images or whatever you want, and just have it be a fun way to get to know each other. And so I, again, would love to know in the chat if you're using some of these things. And some other things I have made over the years and have had students make are, if you, let's say, have students who are interested in certain careers, and maybe they do an interview or a job shadow of somebody, which is common in a lot of schools. I know in my school, students, as they go through each year, they have different tasks: writing a resume, creating a digital portfolio, for example, doing a job or a career study. They could learn about what somebody does and how they got there on their journey and create something like the infographic on the left, which again is a template, but you make it your own. And that's what I love about this, is that it's authentic, it's meaningful, it's personalized to the whoever's creating it, you or the students, and you can find exactly what you need. And there are so many choices available that even when you have some students who might say, I don't know about using this technology, or even teachers, it's easy to get started because of those templates and because of the navigation of it. The other example, which is something fun you can do at any time throughout the year, is asking students to share their interests. Maybe you do project-based learning, maybe you do something like Genius Hour, or maybe it's just let's get to know each other. Beginning of the school year, after an extended break, having students share something that they're interested in, or fun facts about something, maybe like swimming in this case that my student did. And what I noticed is that we all learn so much more because of that power of choice. Students, when they said, wow, I can make an infographic all about swimming or facts about Snapchat or video games, and they could explore and put different images in the background and use different fonts and colors and backgrounds and everything. It was really awesome to see the learning that was happening, and of course the fun that was happening in the process as well. But for students, when in my class for 8th grade STEAM is where they started to use Piktochart. And then when I would have them in Spanish 1 and other years of Spanish, and then also in their other classes, they loved using it and they were familiar with it and they were able to then use it in different ways. So I really like that it offers a lot of choices for students and for teachers that don't take a ton of time. Okay, idea number 3. So we've talked about, starting the year with the overview, getting to know the students. So now it's probably time to roll into, class procedures, how you make some announcements, sharing information. And so these may be some things that you might post in your classroom. Do you have laminated images that you've purchased, perhaps? Maybe you have some that you made and you just laminated, or maybe they're not laminated at all, but you have signs in your room so students know what to expect, especially if you're teaching a course like a chemistry class and students are working in a lab and there are different materials they're interacting with, and you want to make sure that everybody understands like the rules of safety. That's a template that you can use that's available right within Piktochart, but you can change it to make it applicable to your room and to your space. Classroom rules, same thing. I just took this one and I changed some of the background, some of the colors, but anything that you want to kind of adjust to make it relevant to your learning space, easy enough to do. It just doesn't take all the time to start from scratch. So simply look at some of the templates. And again, you'll find those links to the templates here shared with you that you can start. So if you decide, yes, I want to make a welcome back to class, I'm going to make an about me, I want my students to do this icebreaker, it's on trivia, and I want to make some classroom rules. So now you have 4 things to create, but it's not going to take you a ton of time because you have all of these already made resources. Maybe you just want to change the colors and the contact information, but it's easy to start. And again, thinking about the infographics, visually engaging. We want people to retain the content. So the classroom rules or the science lab safety rules, for example, or what they're going to learn about, or a little bit about their teacher, and just to remember that and process that information in a way that's easy rather than lots of words, very complex ideas. So you can find those examples and many more. In my class, I created a rubric for my students who were working on school schedules. And I took one of the templates and I just kind of changed some of the things. I added some images of some school objects and made it kind of fun. Now, some of my students, because I shared that with them, chose to use that as their design. And that was fine. They just made it a little bit more personalized to them by changing the font, the color, adding in some links, of course, writing in Spanish. And then even for some assignments like creating a menu in my class, students can find lots of things. They can find images that are real photos. They can search and just find little backgrounds. They can have different fonts, but it makes it really interesting for them to go and see what's out there and to create something to share. And the best part about this is when students need examples of work that they did throughout their career in school, whether lower elementary, middle school, or high school, when they have a chance to create with these digital tools, we have access to those and they can track their growth over time. And when we look at and think about social emotional learning, we want our students to be self-aware and see where they are in learning and how they've made the progress over time throughout our class, over a couple of years, for example. Self-management, it can be stressful and challenging to try something new, especially when it comes to technology, but helping them to kind of build those skills. Depending on the content area, they're building social awareness when they're designing, the responsible decision making, because again, digital citizenship is very important in helping them to understand what the benefits are of using these tools. From a teacher perspective, using these for our instruction and as a model for a rubric. So maybe you already have your rubric made for projects throughout your year. Take that information, copy and paste it right into some different background design and add some different images into it. And I guarantee that your students will remember it more, because I know that in my case, my students have, and they remember back to it and say, oh, it looked like, and they'll explain it. And I went, yes. Or students who did project-based learning, when they use some of the graphs, for example, to show some of the information that they found for like population, for example, or income, and just different breakdown and statistics, it was very visual, and students remembered that and were able to then have the conversation based on what they had seen in that presentation. So here are some other templates that you can choose from. You have a science assignment you want to do, research papers, and course lists. All of these things are available, and any one of them, I'm sure, will be fantastic for you to choose from. But maybe you're not teaching science, but you're teaching math. So you take the science project assignment template and you just remove the parts of it that look kind of like science and add in some math background or math elements. And there you have it, and change some of the information. But the key is it does not take a lot of time. And with all of these available for us to use, we can get started really quickly. And that's what I have loved most about it. And that's what my students really love about it, is when at first they think, oh, how much time is this going to take? Am I going to be able to use this? Yes, because it's easy to navigate and you have choices available, which is good for some students and for us as educators to have a starting point, and then to just build our confidence and comfort with that over time. Okay, we're on to idea number 4. So now we have things like explanations, facts, reminders. So what does that involve? Well, things like if you have reminders for health, so talking about our wellness and finding balance, or even with our students in our classrooms, we want to make sure that we're focusing on social emotional learning skills, but also that mental health and wellness and our well-being and finding balance are all so important. So you don't have to be a teacher of physical education to use something like the infographic that's on the left, because these are good reminders for all of us in drinking water and sleeping well and exercising and all of the things. It will be a great sign to print and to put in your classroom. But maybe all of those are not applicable to you and you want to change them. Easy enough to do. Design thinking. If you've ever thought about trying something like I had mentioned, project-based learning, design thinking, and it's something new to you and new to your students, well, the great news is there's lots of resources out there to learn about it. But if you want students to get started, really, you just need to go into Piktochart and you can find the information about what design thinking is right here in the infographic. And if you want to share that with your students as an instructional tool for them to learn about it, you can use this very template, but just change some of the backgrounds, the colors, the icons, the images that are in there, and make it your own. Maybe you have different resources and you want to add a hyperlink into it. That's easy enough to do with this. But the best part is with either one of these, you have all of the information there. You just need to change the text or the design or the background and make it your own. And that's the same thing for our students to do as well. So some other things that you might do is checking in with students, offering some tips, especially with virtual learning when so much time is spent on the computer. Kind of ties into the previous example of like tips there for like well-being, but giving some ideas for students to remember whenever they're online, and like getting the glasses or taking a break or having a good space to learn in. And I love that visual, and it's easy to see without even reading the information that's on the screen what it's focused on. So you got the glasses, looks like exercise, you have the time. And so you can walk away with it, whether it's from the words that you've read or it's from the images that are on the screen, because you have the info and the graphics that are there. Classroom newsletters, emails we can send, but maybe you want to try something new this year and you're like, yeah, I've always thought about doing a newsletter, but I didn't know what to use. Well, you have a lot of options available here that make it easy to get started. So let's say that you like the one that's on the left, take that as your own, edit it, change the colors, put your information in, make it whatever you need it to be, and share that. And you can still send it by email. You could print it out if you want to send a copy or post it on a bulletin board, for example, in your classroom. but these are great things to use for many reasons. One, because we're sharing the information with our students and their families. Two, it's good reminders to focus on our wellness and to do some check-ins. And three, because it's great to create with something that's different and engaging and also helps our students to be curious about it and build their skills in these areas too. All right, we are on to the final idea here out of the 5, and this one is interactive and flipped lessons. A couple of years ago, I was doing a presentation about infographics and talking about the different ways that I had used them in my classroom. And at that point, I had used them in a lot of different ways, both as a teacher and then in my own coursework as a student. And somebody had asked me a question. And I remember at the time thinking, I wonder if you could do that. So after that session, I went back to my room and I got on the computer and I logged into Piktochart and I thought about a lesson that I had taught to my students. And I tried kind of putting the pieces together and I shared it with my students and it worked. So I thought, well, yes, you can do interactive lessons and provide flipped learning for your students. And this is what it looked like, at least in one of these cases. I used to do a let's go to Spain kind of travel experience for students. And I had some different steps that I wanted them to do. I wanted them to kind of figure out where is Spain, to figure out how to get there. I wanted them to learn about the largest cities, some of the foods, some of the famous places to kind of explore and put something together to show what they had learned. But I thought I should probably create something to kind of guide them in that direction, to maybe make them curious about it. So what I did was I created from scratch a Let's Go to Spain infographic with a prompt, gave them the start here. And within each of those steps, I had a link or I had instructions. I had a link to a video as well, and they could kind of work through it. And then the end result was they were creating their own representation of what they had learned about Spain and traveling to Spain. The middle example was a presentation, the first one that I had done as part of my coursework years ago about autism. And when I did this, what I loved about it was that I had the multiple parts of it. I had videos, I had links, and then I had all of this information. I had statistics, I had facts about the money that was spent, I had percentages on causes. There was a lot of information. And the best way to kind of put that together, I did not feel was going to be in a written form with like a list. But the fun thing about this was as I put in numbers and percentages, the color chart in that graph shifted based on those numbers. And so when people look at it like you, and when I looked at it and my instructor looked at it, it was very visually engaging. Being able to kind of work through and see the key facts, the history, the timeline, anything that's relevant. So think about things that you teach. If students are learning about a certain topic or a concept, or in my case, they're doing project-based learning and they want to share that information, this is perfect for that because it gives them the chance to put in text if they want to, links, a video, charts and graphics to share statistics. And of course, it's very colorful and it gets them creating and builds digital citizenship skills as well. And then even facts about countries. So maybe it's not something kind of as extensive as my example on the project for autism, but students learn about a different country. And my students that did the Let's Go to Spain, maybe then share 8 amazing facts that they learned about Spain or different places around the world. That is a template that you can use. And so you can, of course, again, change the names of the countries, change the pictures that are with them, the numbers, the background, all of that. And you also want to remind students that wherever they get the information from, they want to properly cite that information as well. And so you can see on that template at the bottom, it does give a source for that, but there are so many possibilities. And I love that when students create, you learn what they have learned. You hear about their excitement when they find some different things in Piktochart, when they create something, but also some of the struggles. And then when the students step in to help one another, like, hey, where did you find this? Or how did you change the font? Or how did you add that link in? So it's a lot of fun to learn together. So there really are so many ways that you can use this. And like I said before, with the examples of the Let's Go to Spain lesson, you can do that on any different topic. It doesn't have to be a trip to Spain, but think about some of the different materials you might use in your classroom that maybe you want students to do a little bit of kind of independent, outside of the classroom learning and exploration. It could be done with project-based learning, for example. Maybe you want them to watch a video or to read from some specific resource, and you put all of that together in the infographic with some information, some instructions, whatever it is that students need, and then give them that time outside of class. That has worked really well. And then their task is to, of course, create something that represents what they learned. Now, some of the other templates, again, these are available for you. You'll just be able to click on the link, but a schedule planner. And when we think about, for example, social emotional learning, when students have new experiences, being able to set goals and being aware of where they are in terms of learning, dealing with the challenges that come sometimes with reaching certain goals, especially if they're working on something like project-based learning, they're doing research, you can have some of these templates like a schedule planner, or even the one for design thinking. If you like the way that it looks and you think, yeah, but I'm not doing design thinking, what is something that maybe you could use that for? And maybe you just change the words that are on it. Maybe you add a link, you add your name, add some other elements to it, but make it your own. And then, of course, the 10 hand washing facts. So this could be a great sign for your classroom, for in your school, or it could be used as a template. So maybe students learn about something in your class and you want them to have 10 takeaways, or what are 10 things that you learned? Or even like I did in my case, 10 facts about you, or any topic that you want, which is where we got the swimming, and I had the Snapchat and the video games, as I had mentioned. But they can make it their own. Just like for us as educators, we don't have to start from scratch. It does not take a ton of time. You just simply search, find a term that you want, and start creating. Even if you don't change much at all, you'll find that your library will soon be full of all of the things that you've created, and you can then duplicate them and change them up a little bit over time, add to them. You don't have to worry about resharing a different link because it all stays the same. So, like I said, those are only 5 back to school ideas. And I know that in the process, I gave you some extra ones, but I just want to start like some thoughts going. Many of you have already started school. Some are starting school very soon. And so we have lots of possibilities. But of course, at the beginning of the year, focusing on some things like building relationships and getting to know students and setting up our classroom space, safety, our news, anything that we want to share with our students and their families. But just a few more examples. I know for me, I love creating and making flyers or making things for social posts on Facebook or Twitter. And a couple of years ago, there was a contest that I could have won. I tried to win some iPads for my classroom from Duolingo. So I used Piktochart to make a banner like, please vote for us. And I shared that out all over the place. And so did my students. My students even made some. Then there are some other things that we could easily just print and put up in our classroom, like the How Vaccines Work, for example. The other one I mentioned earlier, where if you have statistics and thinking again about infographics, you have your information, you have your graphics, you want to take a lot of information that might be very complex and make it easier to process. So it's quick, the people retain it more, it's easier for your audience to engage with it. And so for us as teachers, when you look at this, during an average 7-hour school day, teachers are spending in the breakdown of where they spend time, the biggest part is 5 hours tutoring and teaching. Well, if I shifted that as I'm creating and made it 2 hours, you would see the colors shift in the process, and you can pick the colors that you want for that. But it gives you a good idea of the breakdown. And so for you, for students that you want to share information, you have a lot of statistics to share, this is a great way to do it because somebody can look at it and process that information way easier than just looking at a list of bullet points, for example. And then having students create based on whatever you're covering in your class. When students learn about how to discuss their school schedule, there's often a project involved, and I give them the choice of, what you want to put into it. And so my students love being able to put in real images and then icons and have different choices in fonts and backgrounds. And then to do a presentation in class like I'm doing here with you, where it just flips it right as they move and go with it, and everything is there in that one space. So you really do have a ton of possibilities when it comes to Piktochart, not just for the beginning of the school year, for any time during the year, but it just takes starting. So if you haven't already, create your account and get started today. Find something to use in your first day of school. If you've already started school, find something to use tomorrow, because that's the beauty of it, is there are things that you can use that you can get started with tomorrow. And as promised, many more ideas. I know there are way more than 25 ideas of what you can create when you're using Piktochart, when you're making infographics and all of these different presentations and flyers and anything that you would want. But these, they will be shared with you, are just some of the ideas that I've come up with that I've used to creating, and that my students have also chosen to use. Even, for example, with project-based learning, I had not said to them, well, you need to use Piktochart, but I had a student who had seen my use of it to create a rubric like the one I shared with you, and decided, because they had a lot of information with statistics and geography and all of this, that the best way to represent that and share that was to create an infographic. And it was beautiful what they created, and it wasn't stressful, and it was personalized and authentic and meaningful for them, but also very visually engaging. And it helped us to all learn from what they had experienced in doing their project-based learning. So as you can tell, many, many options available for you. So if you feel up for a challenge, start with number one and work your way through, or have yourself create some and then use some of the other ones in your class with your students or with teachers that you're working with, for example. And then if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information is there. I would love to connect with you on Twitter, on Instagram. My handle is the same. And thanks to everybody who's joining in during the chat. Again, don't forget to check out the presentation. Use the links to those templates if you saw something that you really liked to get started today. And even better, I would love to see what you create. So feel free to create something. Put it out there on Twitter, tag me in your post, because we learn so much from each other. And I know you have a ton of ideas to share. So thank you so much for joining in this amazing Piktochart webinar with some back to school ideas. And I hope you have a fantastic school year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rachelle, for that. This workshop was amazing, valuable, intense, all packed in one. I really enjoyed it. And just so you know, we interview teachers and educators constantly, and we collected a couple of their testimonials to show you how to apply some of these things and other things into your own classes. So watch this.
So I started teaching at Wheaton High School, which is in Maryland, back in 2016, and my kids have always commented on my slides, and so have my colleagues. So Piktochart has just sort of become a natural part of what I do because the response has always been positive. What it's really done, I think, in a lot of my classes, because I teach 9th graders and 12th graders, right? So when there are more difficult concepts, or when we're doing something that's just not that interesting, like they're taking notes, it gets the kids to stay more engaged for a longer period of time. Plus, with the way you all have your interface set up, I can hyperlink things. I can, make things function in different ways. So even if I'm not there, even if I have a substitute, everything that they need can be in one infographic. And I actually have used that a lot when I'm out for like sickness and things like that. I can just put everything in an infographic from Piktochart and the kids are able to access it all. And again, it's an easy visual path to follow. And I think that's important.
I am a faculty member in the school psychology program in the College of Education at the University of Utah. One of the really important things in my training as a school psychologist was trying to figure out ways that we could get people to pay attention to all these great practices that we know exist, but that aren't necessarily being used. And so we found Piktochart as a real legitimate way that we could take information that, typically would be not very approachable. Maybe we hadn't learned how to package it very pretty so that people would want to look at it and engage with it. And what I found was so helpful was having the ability for someone like me who is not a graphic designer. I'm a big proponent that I don't show up to a meeting without having at least one infographic with me to convey the information that I want to convey to other people. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in important meetings with administrators at school districts or foundations in the community. And if I didn't have the visual communication to talk about the impact of the work or talk about why this investment was so important, I'm convinced that I would not be able to have secured funding to support the work that we do, to have people maybe change their perspective and be more welcoming to mental health services in the school. And I've seen those in real time. I've seen that happen where I think back and I'll go back to my team and say, isn't it great that we had that infographic with that information? What do you think would have happened if we didn't? The proof is in the outcome. And so I can't imagine myself showing up without having visual communication. And like you said, being able to tell the story so that people can just resonate with it.
Like I mentioned before, we have a lot of resources prepared for you all in one place. Let me start with hundreds of templates available ready for you in Piktochart. Things like infographics for history, science, grammar, and group work. Don't forget that group work is essential for your students. It's going to help them develop skills like communication and empathy that are going to be very valuable for them later in life. We also group all of our articles about education and infographics in one place, so you can just go ahead and read how to apply them in your day-to-day work. And the part that I was waiting for is to tell you more about the giveaway. We have a special giveaway for teachers and educators, and all you have to do is just go to piktochart.com/backtoschool and enter the giveaway. We have tons of prizes for you and a friend, so don't forget to tag a friend so you both can win. And to finish all of this, I want to thank one more time to Rachelle. Thank you for that wonderful workshop. To all of you that joined today, and if you're a teacher or an educator, well, thank you for everything you do. We really hope that this workshop is going to help you be prepared for this new school year. Also, don't forget that you can just open a free Piktochart account at piktochart.com. You can access all of the stuff that we talked today at piktochart.com/backtoschool. And if you're an educator, you have a special price when you want to upgrade your account to a Pro Piktochart account. With all this being said, thank you so much one more time. My name is Marcus, and I will see you next time. Cheers.